Roger sat on the beach, the waves coming up to his paws, the sun shining brightly on his face, the wind in his hair, and as he stared out into the ocean, he thought to himself, how would they ever help their friend, Timothy the tortoise? He looked over at his friends Sky, Trevor, and Timothy, and they were all talking to the wild hares. Trevor was going on a very long speech about how they needed to create a civilization. He told the hares that they needed to get a little more structure on their houses so they wouldn't fall down if there was a storm, that they needed wagons and fireworks and all sorts of things that the hares hadn't even heard of. And they were listening with wide eyes. But Trevor was very adamant about making the Hare Island one of the greatest islands in all the seas. And as Roger listened, he thought that it was about time he and Sky should be leaving, as he didn't want to get caught up in some civilization. But as he sat there, Sky came up to him and said, well, I suppose we'll probably be leaving pretty soon, but we really want to help our friend, Timothy. And, well, Roger thought about it, and he said, you know, I have always believed that adventure has a way of finding you. So let's just sit here and wait for a few days and just keep thinking to ourselves that we want ourselves to have another adventure and one sure to come to us. And Sky said, oh, that's ridiculous, Roger. Adventures just don't come to you. They do, said Roger. The problem is, we don't always notice them. We gotta keep our eye out. See 'em when we see 'em and grab 'em when we can. That's the most important thing. Believe me, life always gives you away. And Sky didn't know about this. She loved Roger, but she sometimes thought his philosophy was a little wackadoodle. But they did stay there for a week as they watched the wild hares building their civilization and Roger getting more and more antsy, waiting and waiting. But finally, one day, Sky was walking on the ocean when a giant monster came out of the water. And she let out a scream and she ran back to Roger and she said, Roger, I saw something in the waves. It was big. It seemed like it was made out of steel or something. And Roger said, a steel sea monster? That's ridiculous. I don't believe in such a thing. And Timothy decided he wanted to come too, so Roger picked him up as if he was a rock, and the three of them headed down to the ocean, and they looked out, and Roger said, I don't see a thing. You must be imagining it. But just then, a giant steel thing came out of the water again, and Roger let out a yipes and climbed up the tree, and his hair stuck up on his back, and he looked down and let out a hiss. And Sky said, it's all right, Roger. I think I know who it is. It's my friend Zuma. Indeed it was, for at that moment the submarine came up from the water, and a tiny head popped out of a door. It was a little doggy, and the doggy said, Sky, it's good to see ya. And Zuma jumped out, and he jumped into the water, and he ran up to Sky, and the two of them began sniffing each other and licking each other, and they were so happy to see one another. And Roger came down, and he said, I suppose this is a friend of yours. Yes, said Sky. Sky, meet my good friend Zuma. Zuma is a submarinist, and he might be able to help us find Timothy's parents. And Roger said, why, that's an excellent idea. Let's go. And Timothy was very excited as he said he wanted to go back and get all his stuff, and he got his little handkerchief and a jar of jam that Roger had given him and a little toy. And the four of them decided that they were going to set off. I suppose not set sail. I suppose sink down beneath the waves. And so they did. Roger taking as much as he could, and Sky taking as much as she could in case things were to go awry, because, after all, you never know. You always want to be prepared. But they began journeying down into the deep ocean, And oh, it was so beautiful down there. Zuma continued to talk about all the different types of algae and about the how sponges were asexual, how that reproduction worked. And they even saw a giant octopus. But, of course, the most amazing thing were the great sea gods. Now, the sea gods were these titan beasts. Some were lobsters, and some were crabs, and some looked more like krakens. But they all sat down there sleeping, and they were huge, gigantic. I mean, they were bigger than the buildings you'd see in a city. They would have, if they had been on land, they would have been up to the clouds. And Roger and Sky looked at them with awed eyes, and Zuma was shining his light on them. "We must be very careful not to wake them," said Zuma, "although I suppose it's important to note that they've been asleep down here for 1,000 years. And indeed, they didn't end up waking them up, but Timothy could have swore one of them popped its eyes open for just a second before closing it again. And Zuma said, "It won't be long now. We are going to arrive at King Neptune's home. And he has a beautiful kingdom of mermaids and nymphs and all sorts of creatures." And Timothy said, "Oh, according to the stories, that's where my mother would go. I can't wait to see her." And they all were very excited for their friend.